A group of hackers claim they've got details for the nuclear programs of several countries and they're ready to sell them off. The threats come in the wake of last week's ransomware attack by another group that crippled government computer systems around the world. More details now from Ilya Petrenko.
At the end of the day, it's the people who are pushing the buttons, but then ultimately the computers are controlling and operating those nuclear power plants, those missiles that carry nuclear warheads. And the question is, what happens if all these systems get hacked into and then the tools to do this get into the wrong hands? Well, if the online statement by the shadow brokers is real and if the intentions are true, now they are ready to sell these kind of tools. So if you're ready to pay, you will be able to get hold of compromising network data from the nuclear and missile programs of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. So that is the scary and unpredictable bit. They're also saying that they have ways to steal central bank data in many countries, and they're saying that they're ready to do this every month. They came up with a term, monthly data dump. So they're going to sell batches of tech secrets to their subscribers monthly starting this June. We don't know exactly who they are, and we don't even know where they're based. And anyway, it is unlikely that it's just going to be one location. What we do know is that the shadow brokers became famous some 10 months ago with their attempts to auction off hacking and spying tools that were stolen from the U.S. National Security Agency. Well, last month, those dangerous tools that are believed to belong to the NSA were just leaked online instead of being sold. And just as you remember, a few days ago, those were built into the WannaCry ransomware that swept the entire world.
On Wednesday, South Korean President Moon Jae-in said there was a high possibility of conflict with North Korea as the reclusive country presses ahead with nuclear and missile programs it claims are necessary to counter U.S. aggression. The comments came just hours after the South said that it wanted to reopen dialogue with North Korea as Moon seeks a twofold policy, combining sanctions and dialogue, in an attempt to rein in its neighbor. On Sunday, in defiance of UN Security Council resolutions, North Korea conducted its latest ballistic missile launch. In response, Moon was quoted as saying, "The reality is that there is a high possibility of a military conflict at the NLL, or Northern Limit Line, and Military Demarcation Line."
China stressed it will support new sanctions or any other peaceful means the UNSC proposes when it comes to ways to dealing with North Korea's nuclear threat. Beijing's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying said at a regular press briefing on Wednesday, China hopes the Council continues to discuss and act within those parameters, that it must be the international community's goal to find a peaceful solution to this issue. The statement comes after Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, told the press on Tuesday Washington was working with South Korea, China, and Japan to see what other UN sanctions they could impose on the Hermit Kingdom following the latest ballistic missile test.
The United States have issued sanctions in response to developments in Iran's ballistic missile program. The U.S. Treasury added that 2 Iranian defense officials, an Iranian company, and members of a China-based network have been sanctioned for supporting the program. The Iranian officials coordinated the sale and delivery of explosives along with other materials to a Syrian government agency. One of the officials is the director of Iran's Shahid Bakari Industries Group. The group is responsible for Iran's solid-fueled ballistic missile program.
More than half of Iran's population is under 35, and that means in Friday's presidential election, it could be the youth vote that counts. How they'll vote is another matter. The race now seems to be between moderate President Hassan Rouhani and conservative Ibrahim Raisi. And on Tuesday, it was Raisi's turn to gather his supporters in Tehran. They headed to an open-air rally where the former head of Iran's judiciary was going to give his address. And Raisi's young supporters were eager to explain why they were voting for him.
The biggest problem of our country is employment. I'm a university graduate, but I have no job. I'm here because of employment. The Rouhani government cannot create new jobs.
Youth unemployment has gone up under Rouhani, despite the nuclear deal. And Raisi's promise at the rally to create 1 million new jobs a year was music to their ears.
Unfortunately, Rouhani acted against the directives of the Supreme Leader on many occasions. But we expect that with Raisi, we will have a revolutionary government.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday that U.S. President Donald Trump had not passed on any secrets to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov during a meeting in Washington last week, and that he could prove it. Putin, who said Moscow rated Lavrov's meeting with Trump highly, said Russia was ready to hand a transcript of Trump's meeting with Lavrov over to U.S. lawmakers if that would help reassure them, complaining about what he said were signs of political schizophrenia in the United States. Putin said Trump was not being allowed to do his job properly.
Little detail that has come out of that meeting between the US leader and Russia's foreign minister came from President Trump himself. He wrote on Twitter that he'd shared facts about flight safety and terrorism as part of the talks. And now, just days later, US and European officials are discussing an extension of an American ban on flying with laptops in the cabin. With more on that, here's Peter Oliver.
Well, the idea was put forward by the United States side. As it stands at the moment, it would lead to 65 million people a year who travel from EU nations over the Atlantic to the United States. That's around just over 400 flights a day. They wouldn't be allowed to take things like tablets and laptops on board the aircraft, into the cabin, if you will. People use them for work, people use them for entertainment on board the flight. This is already in place as it relates to 10 mostly Middle Eastern cities, flights coming from there to the United States. You're already not allowed to have that. But if you put that into comparison, it's only around 50 flights per day compared to the 400 that come from Europe. So it's quite a major stepping up of security if they were to put this in place.
A mostly friendly press conference between President Donald Trump and Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was overshadowed by a few major differences of opinion. The tone was generally upbeat.
It is a great pleasure to welcome President Erdogan.
But President Erdogan said through a translator he was unhappy that the U.S. agreed to arm the People's Protection Units, or YPG. The YPG is a Kurdish militia that's fighting ISIS on the front lines. The U.S. decided to send material support to the group, which angered Turkey because it considers the YPG to be a terrorist organization.
We should never allow those groups to manipulate the religious structure and the ethnic structure of the region, making terrorism as a pretext or an excuse.
Despite that, Erdogan says Turkey is deeply committed to working with the U.S. He's likely looking to shore up the country's weakening ties with the West. Turkey has been in talks to join the European Union for over a decade, but its recent referendum that expanded Erdogan's power has some EU members concerned about whether the country belongs.
With a government under President Erdogan, there is no perspective of negotiating an accession to the European Union.
Next, an Israeli minister is calling for Syria's President Assad to be assassinated after reports emerged of his government's treatment of political prisoners.
In my view, we are crossing a red line. And in my view, the time has come to assassinate Assad. It's as simple as that.
OK, live to Jerusalem now. Our Middle East correspondent there is Paula Slier. Hi, Paula. Israeli politicians rarely hold back verbally, but this was pretty extreme, wasn't it?
It certainly was extreme, but again, if you're surprised that these are the comments that are made by the Israeli Housing and Construction Minister, you need to just look at his background and then perhaps it's not that surprising. We're talking here about a former IDF general who in fact oversaw the war back in 2008 between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Now that was a war, according to B'Tselem NGO, that saw some 700 casualties. The Israeli government puts the figure at almost 300. Now, whichever is the correct figure, there's no doubt that that was certainly a deadly war that was overseen by this minister. At the same time, his comments come in the wake of accusations by the US State Department regarding mass executions that they say were carried out by the Syrian government in the government-run Sadna prison. Now, this is despite the fact that Damascus has denied the accusations.
Gunmen stormed the offices of broadcaster RTA in Jalalabad, Afghanistan. NBC News reports at least 6 people were killed in the attack on May 17th, and at least 14 others were wounded. 4 of those killed were gunmen, and 1 gunman was captured alive. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack. The BBC reports that first, 2 suicide bombers caused an explosion outside. Gunmen then entered RTA's offices, and heavy gunfire erupted for several hours. ISIS and the Taliban have carried out a series of deadly attacks in Afghanistan over the last few months. Afghan forces have struggled to contain both insurgencies. The United Nations says nearly 3,500 Afghan civilians were killed last year. U.S. Army General John Nicholson labeled the war in Afghanistan a, quote, stalemate in February, calling for the U.S. to send thousands of more troops to the country.
Tell us more then about the Islamic State group in Afghanistan, its influence there.
Yes, actually, the Islamic State in Afghanistan is having presence there since June 2016. So just after the day, the 29th of June, when the caliphate was declared, they declared their presence there, and it was with 2 prominent leaders, Abdurrauf Khadim, which is a former Guantanamo detainee, and he was sort of number 2 in the military of Taliban. So he joined the Islamic State at the time, and also Hafiz Saeed Khan, who had a real local influence. Both of them were killed in 2015-2016 by drone, but they succeeded to push some of the Taliban, some of the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, and some of the Uzbek Islamic Party active in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Tajikistan to form this group, which is mostly from 2,000 or 3,000 fighters, which is very important. They first began attacking the army and the police in Afghanistan as late as 2015, and then their big terrorist attack in Kabul late June 2016, when they attacked the Nepali forces who were protecting the U.S. embassy, and then they made 2 attacks against the Hazara community, the Shia Hazara community, which is active also in Syria, and this is why they attacked them. And then they attacked, of course, the military hospital of Kabul, and they also attacked a U.S. convoy lately in Kabul. And this attack in Jalalabad is a first. And by targeting, of course, the TV and the radio station, they aim to kill a journalist and also a policeman.
Ukrainian and EU officials sign a long-awaited visa waiver deal. Ukrainians with biometric passports will now be able to enter EU countries without visas for up to 90 days.
Ukraine return to the European family. Ukraine say final farewell to the Soviet and Russian Empire.
The deal comes after years of negotiations and agreement on reforms.
After this positive decision, the relation between your country and the European Union will be easier. We want to work as European Parliament, as a European institution, for good solutions, also for the implementation of Minsk agreement.
The visa waiver deal covers tourism and business trips for up to 90 days within any 180-day period. This man in Kiev says, I travel many times to Europe. It always cost money with a lot of paperwork. Visas were very short and I had to stick to the dates. Now this visa-free regime will make it easier for those who go to Europe for traveling or for business purposes, he says. The deal also covers travel to Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein and Switzerland, but not Ireland and the UK.
This unusual law in Washington state prevents elected leaders and emergency management officials from preparing any evacuation plans in the event of a nuclear attack. The issue has come up, of course, as North Korea continues to test ballistic missiles in its pursuit of being able to reach the United States, with a nuclear weapon. Experts say the latest test over the weekend revealed a rocket that can travel 1,300 miles. But the law that prevents any planning for a nuke attack has been on the books since the end of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. It was passed in 1984. The legislator behind the law says at the time nobody thought anyone could survive a nuclear war with Russia, so why prepare? But also, as Ronald Reagan was projecting strength, this was a way to promote peace.
But other people said, if you plan for it, then you encourage it. You are really sending a message that you're getting ready to do something maybe yourself.
Just a few years after the law passed, the Berlin Wall came down and everyone forgot about this obscure law. Bill?
Wow, that is something else. Are people worried in Seattle, Dan? What are they saying there?
Well, there's certainly no panic in Seattle or for the rest of the state. Experts say North Korea is still probably 3 to 5 years from being able to reach the West Coast, but there is a realization that Seattle would make a logical target if and when that day comes. There are roughly 1,300 nuclear warheads stored in the area, the largest concentration in the world. There's also a big Army base here, plus this is a high-tech hub, of course, with Boeing, Microsoft, and Amazon, and perhaps the biggest reason it could be a target, it's the closest big American city to North Korea. So now a bill has been introduced in the state legislature to reverse that 1984 law.
Times have changed now. North Korea is doing their saber rattling, and right now we can't even prepare for it. The threat isn't imminent, but 5, 10 years down the road, you know, it is something that could possibly happen. So that's the whole idea of emergency management, is prepare for it.
While you were sleeping, New Orleans removing history piece by piece. Crews taking down another Confederate monument, this time of General P.G.T. Beauregard. Supporters and protesters watching the removal. One side claiming the statue is a harsh reminder of slavery and segregation. Others say it's an important part of history. This is the third of 4 Confederate statues slated for removal in New Orleans.
Let's turn to some breaking news now. And Chelsea Manning has been released from prison. The former U.S. military intelligence analyst had been held since 2013. She was sentenced to 35 years behind bars for leaking secret documents to WikiLeaks in 2010. But U.S. President Barack Obama shortened her sentence before he left office.
Well, right now, Chelsea Manning remains an active duty soldier for the U.S. Army, unpaid, but still receiving benefits, including health care benefits. Now, this is Manning back in 2013, known then as Private First Class Bradley Manning. The day after his sentencing, Manning announced that going forward, he was to be referred to as Chelsea, explaining she identified as a woman. Regardless of that announcement, she was placed in the U.S. Disciplinary Barracks, which is a men's facility. The ACLU filed a lawsuit on her behalf, and the Army was forced to provide hormonal treatment for gender dysphoria. Now, Janet, I mentioned she remains on active duty, receiving all of those benefits. The reason that that's important is because she is eligible for gender reassignment surgery, something that for the first time would be provided by the U.S. military. Shannon?
Religious faith under fire this morning. A high school teacher now in hot water accused of imposing her religious beliefs on a coworker.
Well, Fox News radio host Todd Starnes is fired up, weighing in with his 1-minute commentary for us. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning. Yeah, Toni Richardson works for the Coney School in Augusta, Maine. She is also a devout Christian lady, and her faith landed her in hot water with school officials. Miss Richardson was accused of imposing strong religious beliefs on a coworker who happened to attend her church. So the district laid out their case against Miss Richardson in a coaching memorandum, and I have an exclusive copy of that memo. They accused her of using phrases like, "I will pray for you," and "you were in my prayers." The district says such language is unacceptable in the classroom. Look, even if the other person attends the same church, same rules apply. First Liberty Institute says that memorandum is a gross violation of the law, not to mention human decency. First Liberty filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, charging the school district with religious discrimination. Now, to be clear, the Constitution does not force school workers to check their religion in at the schoolhouse door. As for the Augusta School District, in the words of Dionne Warwick, we'll just say a little prayer for you, because First Liberty Institute is about to be on you like a pit bull on a pork chop.
Ooh. A string of deadly storms tore through the middle of the country, devastating several communities. Tornadoes flattened dozens of homes from Oklahoma to Wisconsin. At least 24 people were killed, and at least 2 people were killed, and dozens more were hurt. The massive system stretches across more than 1,000 miles. So far, 26 tornadoes have been reported across 5 different states. David Begnaud in Chautauqua, Wisconsin. That's one of the hardest hit communities. David, good morning.
Gail, good morning. It is still raining as we get our first real look this morning at the damage, which spans nearly 50 miles. 50 miles here in Wisconsin. At this property, it's as if somebody took a knife and sliced off the treetops, bulldozed what was on this slab. But I want you to look at the back part of the property. That house back there, it's as if it was untouched except for a few shingles on the roof that were merely displaced, as what's believed to have been a tornado hopscotched through here. 10 minutes down the road, as the crow flies, there is a mobile home park that was hit, and the damage is severe. Video captured from above this trailer park in Wisconsin shows the power of what is believed to be a tornado.
We pulled walls off of people and then carried them, put them on stretchers, leg injuries, arm injuries. It's nothing I've ever seen in my 20-plus year career in law enforcement.
Down power lines, trees cut off at their trunks, and a massive field of debris has littered the neighborhood many call home. One person has died at this trailer park.
These are people we work with, we go to school with, and they're our friends and our neighbors.
All of my neighbors are okay.
In Elk City, Oklahoma, a tornado tore through this subdivision. At least 100 structures were damaged and more than 50 destroyed. Elk City Mayor Bill Helton.
The devastation it's hard to explain. It looked like some of the homes just exploded. Of course, some of them look like they've been, blown apart by high winds.
The winds tossed buses and trucks in this lot like matchbox cars. And reports of people trapped in their homes kept rescue crews working overnight. A 53-year-old man was killed after his car was thrown several hundred feet, pinning him between his vehicle and his home.
Climate change is threatening birds' migration patterns, according to a new study. Each spring, birds migrate from their winter hangouts to their breeding grounds. Birds know to begin migrating when the sun appears longer during the day, which happens the same way each time Earth goes through its orbit. So, if the birds arrive at the right time, breeding grounds will be full of food, from blooming plants to swarming insects. But the changing climate isn't as reliable as Earth's orbit, and it's throwing off when spring arrives each year. This could threaten whole bird species. If spring is late, the birds show up when there's less food and worse weather. And if spring starts early, the birds show up after resources have already been picked over. Either way, it'll be harder to survive, and they'll be able to hatch fewer chicks. Researchers studied 48 bird species and found that while most of them have adjusted their schedules to match the new seasons, 9 species of songbird have not. The researchers noted that this could be the first signs of a domino effect, because as climate is altered, nature may not be able to keep up.